Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the second episode of the Bird's Eye View with Mirror's Simon Bird. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and this week we've got another host of questions for Simon to answer, all about Newcastle United with the return of the Premier League on the horizon after this international break. Simon, welcome back to the podcast. Have you had a good weekend?
Very good weekend. No football, apart from I had to cover Scotland on Sunday night, which is interesting. And I was dropping my daughter off at university. So a few family jobs, but it's a second year. So not quite as emotional and emotionally destroying as the first time you dropped them off, but still quite a moment.
I remember when I first got dropped off at university down in Sheffield, and I said to Mum, once we were all packed in the halls, I said, that's your job done now. Bye-bye. Yeah. Walked in the halls, and then this other woman walked past. She said, there's a woman crying hysterically outside. And I thought, probably shouldn't have said that. That came out a little bit more brutal than I expected.
Parents' job's never done. Have you had a big weekend? You're moving like you're not like a metal robot or anything, but you've done the Great North Run?
Yeah, it was much tougher on Monday. As our listeners know, Matthew Raisbeck watched me, how shall we say, stumble up the stairs on Monday, because I haven't taken the lift since December 2022 in this office, which means I take the stairs every morning and every evening on the way back down. 84 stairs there are. And on Monday, I seriously was reconsidering my life choices, but I didn't give in up and down them stairs on Monday, then today, which is Tuesday. So yeah, I'm feeling all right.
Are you going to reveal your time and how much you sponsored as well, weren't you?
Yeah, so 2 hours 11.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Very good, happy with. And then, we raised collectively, I think it was over $2.5 grand for the Sir Robson Foundation. There was a group of us doing it. George Culkin, the leader, the captain, is
illustrious journalist group, wasn't it?
Yes, Tom used to be from Newcastle United, and a few others. Ollie Holt was another one as well. Yeah. So there was a good bunch of us, and it was lovely conditions to run in, not so much for the spectators, but always a great event. Will we be seeing you join the group next year?
Absolutely not. No, I've done it twice, and the second time I did it, busted me. So no, I'm not going to do it ever again. I can't run. I can cycle as long as you like all day, but I'm too old to run now.
You're the second guest we've had on this podcast this week, which was just a firm no.
A very firm no. Yeah, I've done it. I've done the atmosphere. I wrote a piece for the Mirror about it in our results supplement, because the Mirror used to sponsor the Great North Run, and I think I've done it. It's a wonderful event. Great. If anyone, I'll sponsor anyone they want to, as long as I haven't got to do it myself. That's it.
Yeah. You and Reyes are in the same boat. He was like, not happening. So, but we'll hopefully see a few others on the start line next year. This week we're going to talk about the kind of 3 things that we think Eddie Howe would have worked on during this international break, because as we've said previously, they've got the results, but the performances haven't been brilliant. That's going to have to improve, and we think it will do. They've got 2 winnable games coming up, and then the cup as well before Man City head up to Tyneside. And then, as I say, we've got a real good mix of questions that have come in from you guys on Twitter and via the email address at the eibwpodcast@reachplc.com. So Simon, I did task you with coming into the studio with 3 items you think Eddie Howe would have wanted to have worked on over the last fortnight. Which is the first item you bring into the table?
Well, I think they have been working for a start. I saw someone from the club, a couple of people from the club on just before the weekend, and they were in over the weekend, and then they got a couple of days off, which have been shuffled around. So I think the first one will be, Eddie Howe mentioned it after the last game, is that fitness levels. He actually wanted some of his players to get international games to up their fitness levels, and the people who have been at home, I'm pretty sure he's been running them, and to get a bit of tough fitness work in after pre-season. Now it looked like the team needed that. So number 1, get his team running power, which they looked a bit undercooked in the game so far, which pretty much everyone would agree. Secondly, I think tactically, even though there's not been many people there, that I'm sure they've been thinking about how to not just be a team on the transition, soaking up pressure, hitting people on the break. I think there has to have been a little bit of tactical thinking or work about how to take the sting out of a game with the ball without just ticking a game over, but trying to be a little bit better on the ball and getting that balance between being a defensive team and soaking it up and being an all-out front foot, gung-ho team, like a forceful team like Eddie Howe's team can be. I think they want to try and find a bit better balance this year. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, I think Eddie Howe will probably want to be drawing a line under the transfer window. I know we're still talking about it, and fans are quite a lot, but draw a line under it and get everyone settled in for like a 4-5 month long haul to get past Christmas and into January with the club in a really good position in the cups and in the league, and just to settle everyone down after the unsettling scenes in June and towards the end of the window, when everyone feels insecure, everyone thinks they might be kicked out. And I think Howe has spoken about throwing his arms around the players, giving them some love, and bringing them back into the fold and being part of Newcastle, and letting them know that this is their future, immediate future, and to get on with it.
Okay, so quite the checklist there. I think the first question to ask you is, given that he's had Joe Linton and Longstaff to work with over the past fortnight, the big question is the midfield on Sunday. Bruno will definitely start, but Tonali's featured for Italy in both of the games. He got a lovely assist against France, and he's looked fit. He's looked so much better than I thought he would do, considering how long he was out for. But the big question is, does he come straight back into that starting 11? Do you think the fact that he's worked with Sean and he's worked with Joe Linton over the past fortnight means that Tonali probably will start on the bench, because he's had that time to work on the formation and the setup and the game plan ahead of the trip to Wolves?
Yeah, I'm not sure they've unveiled a game plan, last week when they were training for the Wolves game, but I think that's basically how Eddie Howe works, is that when the players he's had and that he's had in training himself to work with kind of usually get the nod for that week. And we've seen it last season, the season before. So I reckon that's probably right, that even though, everyone will be dead chuffed that Tonali's got minutes in his legs, played games for Italy, probably Howe has spoken about easing him back in. And I think probably put him on the bench, maybe give him a bit longer at Wolves if they can afford to, or if the game needs changing. So I don't think Longstaff's done an awful lot wrong this season. So probably go with him and then keep Tonali on the bench in reserve.
What do you think Sean's thinking when he's watching Italy play? Do you think he's thinking, what time's nearly up here? Or do you think he'll just drive him on to even bigger and better levels?
I don't think a player can look at a direct rival like that. You could say that Bruno would get a rest after and Tonali will slot it in the middle. There's various ways that Eddie Howe can use Tonali. He could use him on the left where Joe Linton is. If Joe Linton dips, which is unlikely because he's a beast at the minute. So I think Sean will just be like ploughing on, doing his running, being the really supreme athlete that he is. Very important in Newcastle's press, very important to getting out and pressuring the ball and doing all. He's such a good athlete, and I don't. That's one of the big debates between Longstaff and Tonali. Tonali, we assume he's brilliant on the ball, adds class, a range of passing that maybe Longstaff hasn't got, but has Tonali got the physical robustness and the kind of pumped up running power and tenaciousness to be part of that right-hand midfield? That's the kind of debate that all the fans are having. There's strengths and weaknesses for each player.
I think he looks physically fitter than he did before the ban. He looks like he spent more time in the gym, which of course he's had the time to do so. But you're watching him in the cameos that he has had for Newcastle United since that ban was lifted. His thighs look bigger. He looks like he's been really pushing himself away from the training pitch. And I think it is a debate. And as you say, both players do have certain weaknesses, certain abilities. But what a great debate to be having. Eddie Howe will be really relishing having to make this decision, because Sean has had his critics, but I think he started the season reasonably well. And I think he tends to be one of those players that when the criticism is really on his back, he tends to rise up against it and improve himself. Yeah,
he does. And that's the kind of competition Newcastle want right across the squad. When we spoke to Paul Mitchell last week, the dream in 3 years' time and sort of the constant churn of changing the squad is to have a first 11 and then a direct challenger in every position. And you can probably look at Lewis Hall's performance for the England under-21s last night, where he got 2 assists and a man of the match award. And he's not started, if I'm right in saying, in the last couple of games. Lloyd Kelly's been in there at left back. So Lewis Hall is like pushing as well. So he's used the international break to do well. And he'd be pushing for a start as well.
The international break's been really good for Newcastle, hasn't it? Because you've got Tonali getting minutes, you've got Lewis Hall coming back feeling really confident after a fantastic performance last night on Monday evening. You've got Anthony Gordon loving life finally in an England camp and being allowed to show what he can do. He will probably play against Finland this evening. So hopefully by the time you guys hear this, he's netted a hat-trick. It'd be fantastic to see. But the players who have gone away have had a really good experience. Even if you like Tino Livramento, Nick Pope, you're probably not going to get the feature. Still being within that camp, it's a really good experience. And for once, it feels like a good thing.
Yeah,
the international break, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Like usually Newcastle and fans you send the players away and just fingers crossed or like hope that they don't even play. But with Howe wanting, I mean, Gordon spoke the other day before the England match about how he, it was a difficult summer. He was away on duty for all that 5-6 weeks for England and only played like 6 minutes off the bench. And fitness is, you're still on duty, but your fitness is not going to be, it's not going to be tuned as much as it would be coming back pre-season and doing a full pre-season. So he's a bit undercooked, but the way he played for England the other day, it looked like he's kind of finding his stride, finding his freedom, stretching the play on the left. Some amazing runs into the centre as well, which Trent picked out with that unbelievable pass. If you haven't seen it, look it up. So it looked like it was a good game for Gordon as well. So it is probably going to be one of those, as long as no one gets injured on Tuesday night, just before, we're recording this now, then everyone will be pretty happy to see the team back. Yeah,
most certainly. And you mentioned that you spoke to someone who kind of give you a bit of an insight on what they've been working on over the last fortnight, and it seems like fitness is right at the top of the agenda. Why do you think that is from Eddie Howe? Obviously, he wants his players to be fit, but do you think he has looked at these performances and he's looked around and he thought, they're looking a little bit tired, they're looking a little bit disjointed? I think he has gone on record actually to talk about the fitness levels in the first 3 games or so of this season. And do you also think that we will see an improvement come Sunday?
Yeah, and I think Newcastle aren't the only team in the Premier League who looked a bit flat. I mean, no one's really hit the stride and really surprised anyone with kind of and I think that's a hangover from the Euros. And the players who've looked best are the players who haven't really, been part of a team at the Euros. Like for instance, Haaland came back so fresh and so on it for Man City. So I think that's a little bit of a hangover from a massive tournament summer, and I think probably the next 2-3 games is when you're going to see which teams are up for it. I don't think Newcastle players are really fit. They've done a lot of fitness work, but it's just that when it all gels together, there's kind of a steamroller effect where everyone's working with their and got a relationship with their teammate next to them, and it all looks a bit more coherent and more energetic. And I also think there's probably look more energetic when you're on the front foot and you're fizzing the ball around and dominating the game, whereby Newcastle looked a little bit passive in the last 2-3 games, soaking play up. So they haven't looked as fit as they probably are.
I think anyhow will really have enjoyed being able to work with the likes of Kieran Trippier, Joe Linton. I mean, look, obviously we know Trippier's retired from international football, and we'd love Joe Linton to be in the Brazilian squad. But the fact that they're not, and Trippier has now retired from international football, that's a massive benefit in Newcastle United, because quite a few of their stars are international duty, but he's still got some big hitters that he's been able to work with over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Trippier now.
You mentioned your third point about the transfers.
Yeah, Trippier. Yeah, it's great, and I think Trippier changed the game. Was a big part of changing the game at Bournemouth, and I think he's. I mean, if you're debating Tino Livramento or Kieran Trippier at the minute, I'll be tempted to go again with Kieran Trippier and see what he can offer for a full game, see if he can get Newcastle on the front foot again and get him playing. I think he wants to play. He's 33. He doesn't want to be sitting around on the bench. He's been a consummate pro in that we've seen him with his arm around younger players. When he's been warming up, he's been coaching. He's been coaching teammates. He's been giving them tactical insights, which the manager, it's like that's been part of a big part of a team. So even though he's been on the bench, but I think he's still got a lot to offer. Now, he's clearly wanted to leave. He has wanted to leave. There's been a lot going on in his life and his football life as well, in terms of the Turkish window still being open. I'm pretty sure he was still hopeful of going to a Turkish team and getting a move and refreshing his career somewhere else. But I mean, if you're Eddie Howe and you're Paul Mitchell, you're saying, I'm sorry, you're staying here. I know you might want to go, but you're under contract to us for another 2 this season and next. You're staying. And it's kind of a brutal thing. Now, I don't think there's been any fallout between that yet publicly. And I hope there's not, because I still think Kieran Trippier can nail down the right back position for Newcastle. Now, whether there's been promises made to Tino Livramento that he's going to be number 1 this season, and there's been some kind of deal saying that's your pathway and you're succeeding Trippier, maybe he's the official number 1 now, but Trippier's got loads to offer, and I still think he can play for Newcastle and get them make them a better team.
Is it an important victory for Howe? I mean, you said there Mitchell and Howe, so are you suggesting that both Mitchell and Howe want Trippier to stay?
Yeah, I mean, we've asked both people about it, and they both seem to be on the same page. Well, I mean, on the record anyway. I don't know whether, I mean, if Newcastle could get 20 million for Kieran Trippier, they probably would collectively decide to sell him, but there's clearly not enough money on his head at the minute to tempt the club even to loan him out, even to get the wages off, because it's probably on big wages as well. They're not going to subsidise another player to have Kieran Trippier on loan. So I think that probably the whole club's on the same page, unless a big offer comes in, which it clearly isn't from Turkey at the moment. So, yeah.
But if he does stay, and Newcastle United don't accept any proposals from either the Turkish clubs, so I think there's 4 that were linked for Trippier. Yeah, the battle for that right back place is really interesting. Now, you say you don't. Maybe there's been some sort of deal made with Livramento. Howe doesn't strike me as that kind of person to make those promises. I think he likes the element of competition. He bases it on what he can see. Of course, you've got the game plan. But I don't think Tino Livramento was putting it in a bad shift this season. I thought he was quite good against Spurs. And I do think he's Newcastle United's number 1 right back. You have got Kieran Trippier, who still thinks he can offer something at the very top level. And he can do. We're not doubting that. But will it be a test of his character to be on the bench?
Of Livramento's character?
No, of Trippier.
Trippier. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a huge test of his character. If he's sitting on a bench for the next 5 or 6 games and barely kicking a ball, he's a senior player. He's just retired from England. You saw the number of assists he got last year, double figures. So, and I still think there's this trade-off. Livramento is a power right back. He's a beautiful runner. He can put the afterburners on and go past anyone in a very direct way. But I don't see him offering the same intricacies of passing and quality of cross just yet that Trippier can add. And that close quarters play wide on the right when Newcastle are in the opposition's half, I think there's no one better than having your man out there, Kieran Trippier, to receive the ball and do something clever with it. So, Trippier is a brilliant runner and really fit and fast. And I do think they're 2 different players, really. They're the same position, but they've got different qualities.
It's interesting, and let us know in the comments who your number 1 right back is, because I think for some, the scars of last season are probably still very, very raw. There was a lot of mistakes from Kieran in his game, and obviously he had injury issues. Age was catching up with him as well, perhaps, in certain elements of his game. Do you think he's still impacted by some of the mistakes he made last season? What did we see enough in the Euros? Because the Euros, he had quite a good campaign.
He did
being on the left side.
On the left. So he always had to come inside, and he couldn't, get the whip ball in with his left foot because they played him out of position. There was about 4 players played out of position in the Euros, which is bizarre. But he did do. I mean, in big, high-pressure England games, he was one of the best. He was one of the better players. So you go from that to being on the bench for Newcastle, and that's not a happy situation for Kieran to be in. And I do massively sympathise with him if he's wanted out and it's being blocked and he wants a new adventure. For instance, if you're Kieran Trippier, you're not playing, and Galatasaray have come in for you, or Fenerbahce, Jose Mourinho wants you in Turkey, then you're going to take that adventure. As a human being, you're going to go, wow, that's something else for me. Turkish crowds, absolutely mad. Big derby games, European football. I feel sorry for him if he's not been allowed to do that and he's sitting on the bench at Newcastle.
And from Newcastle's point of view, because some would say, look, if you are offered, let's just pluck a number there, 10 million for Kieran Trippier, some would argue, well, should you not cash in if he's not going to be first team and you get rid of the wages? I mean, why are Newcastle wanting to keep him around? Is Eddie Howe wanting to keep him around for what we've seen in recent games when he's been on the touchline and he has been like a second head coach, giving instructions out? Or do you think you think Eddie Howe does actually still see him as a first choice right back?
Well, I think the money hasn't been right. I think if the transfer fee or the loan fee has not made it in Newcastle anywhere near Newcastle's interest to do the deal. So that if the money was 20 million, they would listen 15 million maybe. I mean, everyone can have their own opinion on what it would take to get what they would take as chief executive of Newcastle. Good game to play in the pub tonight. To release Kieran Trippier and weaken the squad and give you a bit more to spend in January. So it's that one of the judgment calls. But I think Eddie, you're right. Eddie Howe probably, even though Livermento's playing now because he's done pre-season, he's been solid and shown himself really fit. I still think Eddie Howe wants him round and perhaps sees him as I hope he sees him. I'm sure he does as a first choice right back.
You would assume it would have to be that because I think the sell to Kieran Trippier, right, Tino is first choice. You can push him and you're still within a chance of people, getting him out of the team. But he is going to be the first choice from now, and you've got to prove that you can get that spot back. What we want you to do is to bring that influence as you have been doing on the touchline, where you are, shouting instructions, you are offering advice. I don't think that's attractive to Kieran Trippier because he wants to play football. So he'll be knocking on the door, and if he does stay past September the 13th, which is when the Turkish window shuts, he'll be knocking on the door and saying, or he'll be knocking on the door now, actually, and saying, "Look, I want reassurances here, and I don't want to stay till January if I am just going to be, second fiddle to Tino Livramento."
Yeah, or maybe they've told him you've got to stay till January and suck it up, and then we'll make a new call on what's happening. I'm sure Trippier's agents are working overtime to try and sort the situation out, because I mean Kieran Trippier has been a massive behind the scenes ally and very close to Eddie Howe, and we've been on trips before and we've seen them sitting on a sofa in hotels chatting away. So they're clear that he's one of those signings. I mean, he's one of the most influential signings Newcastle has ever made. So if he went, and he's only been here two and a half years, so people will be sad to see him go. But I think he needs to be treated with a lot of respect in terms of the player he still is. And Kieran Trippier shouldn't be sitting on the bench for Newcastle. I think if he's fit and he proves himself, and again the next time he gets on, I think he's the right back.
But at the same time, you don't want to just give him free access to that spot, do you? Because that's not fair on Tino Livramento, who is proving himself to be a very, very good right back.
Yeah, and the blocks that Livramento has got in, crucial blocks off the line in that rearguard action against Spurs the other week, they're really important blocks. So yeah, there's, I mean, if you're Eddie Howe, it's a really hard call to make, and kind of you wonder whether he's made it now and he sticks with it and Livramento's his man.
Because it would be very tough on Livramento if he gets the team sheet at 3:30 on Sunday and he's not in the starting 11, having gone away with England. Performed really well for Newcastle in the 3 games prior.
Yeah,
he's now really tough.
Yeah, he's now one of England's top 2 right backs, and then he can't get in the Newcastle team. So how's that going to look for Kieran Trippier? Yeah, like big calls all around for Eddie Howe. And
do you think if Trippier knocked on the door and said, "Boss, I need some assurances that I'm going to be first choice here," what do you think Eddie Howe would be saying?
I don't think I'm not sure a player would do that. He would want to know how he can get back in the team, and if you don't see me getting back in the team, then you've got to let me go. I think that'll be the argument. I've got offers here. Please let me go. I think Kieran, even though the club have denied he's going, and they've said, and Paul Mitchell has said it, and Eddie Howe said it, we need him here, and there's going to be no deal. I think right until that window, 13th of September, I think Kieran Trippier, behind the scenes, not publicly, not doing it badly, will be thinking, come on, let's get a deal done. Let's sort this out. It's not, I want a new adventure. I want a fresh start. No disrespect to Newcastle, but he needs to be playing in a big club.
One to watch indeed. Now, the third point you did make was about the transfer window and trying to settle everyone down. Do you think the players who are here look at what happened in the summer and will be disappointed that they didn't see a big name coming in?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, like, all the players want to, they want to know who Newcastle are signing next and who's coming in, and whether it threatens their position or whether it makes their position easier because you've got another brilliant player next to them. So they'll definitely be disappointed. They'll definitely be they're like fans, really, even though it's their job and they're internally in the club and they don't worry about stuff as much as fans do. They don't debate these issues as much as fans do. But players do want to see a club progressing and to be challenged. They might not want the challenge, but when the challenge comes, it makes them better. They want better players, and the journey that everyone thinks Newcastle are on to the top, it's kind of got the brakes on a bit. But yeah, they should have landed a player in the summer, and it will be a question mark in a lot of players' heads. It might make their jobs easier because no one big has come in. It might mean Fabian Schär's the first choice instead of Gay, or you don't have to rush Botman back as soon as too soon. So, but it will be a question mark in their heads, yeah.
But at the same time, they'll be looking at it and saying, right, the window's shut now. No one else is coming in. It's down to us to make sure that we're in a position in January where they can add real quality. Maybe we can push on for the top 4.
Yeah, and Eddie Howe will be saying, this is our team. We've had all these distractions. Let's be a team. Let's support each other. Let's dig in. And people thought, because we haven't signed anyone, people think we're going to finish 10th. And, you know, our rivals might not respect us enough and as much and think we're going to be a part of the elite anymore. Let's prove them wrong again, like we did 2 years ago, and when nobody thought Newcastle could get top 4. And I think that's the kind of mentality Howe has spoken about, not a siege mentality, but there's something working against the club, whether it's working against Howe or working against not being able to sign players. He wants a mentality of, right, come on, the world's not really doing us any favours here. PSR's not doing any favours. Let's prove everyone. Let's prove what great players we are and how we can be a better team than even this current squad is on paper is. And that's the message it'll be getting out, to settle everyone down and saying there's cups to play in, that everyone's going to get a chance, but you've got to earn it. And let's prove the world wrong.
Well, fingers crossed they can get that, because it does feel like there's a bit of a negative undercurrent, so, you know, around Newcastle United at the moment, despite the fact they were unbeaten at the start of this season. It does feel like there's something bubbling away under the surface, and I just try to put my finger on it. I mean, weird, is that a fair? That's fair.
It's like yeah, because it's not been the media like exploiting this, or it's come out of the mouths of the people who are directly at the top of the club. So there's been Eddie Howe with his press conference in Germany. There's been Paul Mitchell last week, directly contradicting some of the stuff that Eddie Howe said, which creates a bit of a weird vibe. But it's not affected them on the pitch, weirdly, which is the happy thing. In the past, you've seen things, friction happening at Newcastle 15, 20 years ago when I first started, and it has affected them on the pitch. And there's been, but this hasn't. They've just soldiered on and they've got results, and that's how it's got to be.
We've spoken about what he'll be working on with regards to the training pitch and the players he's got to work with. They've got the results, and as we say, the performances have been awful. But what positives do you think he has taken away from the performances, as bad as they've been? Is there something that you think he's seen and he goes, okay, that's good, we don't maybe need to work on that as much as this? You know, what's the positives he can take away from the first 3 Premier League games?
Well, a massive positive is, compared with the amount of goals that they leaked last year, they appear to have got a defensive system which is pretty resilient. You know, they do all the dirty work, get blocks in, close down. Spurs were on a roll at one point, like 10, 15 minutes. Spurs were really swarming all over Newcastle, but they held firm and they stayed in the game. And it's remarkable that I think the home games, they've only had 4 shots on target, but they scored in 3 of them and got the points. So that's a massive positive, that they've stemmed that like kind of leaky openness of the team last year. And now the balance they've got to work on now is swinging forward to master the ball a bit more. And I think it'd be kind of another positive is that how well and how effectively they've hit teams on the break. So they've actually been powerful in the transitions and on the break, and you know the pace they've got. Even Murphy flying up the wing, that's good. Isaac's been fit. They've got a fully fit squad. That's a positive. So it's just a case of getting the chemistry now to get these wins, but get them in a more convincing kind of rounded football way. I think. Yeah,
no, totally agree with you. And in terms of Sunday's team sheet, and we will have the match preview with John Gibson on Thursday, so watch out for that one. But I'll get Birdie's opinion. it seems to me that you're thinking Kieran Trippier might start a right back. Am I right in making that assumption?
That's a really. I'm not paid to be Eddie Howe. It's just this is one of the decisions that you're probably right. He's going to have to pick Livramento again, isn't he? Because Livramento in the games has done nothing wrong, really, not a lot wrong. But it's an away game as well, and it's a away game against kind of tough opponents who are quite nimble and quick. So I think I'm going to back down here and say probably he's going to pick Livramento again. I would like, if Kieran Trippier is trained and he's settled, then I would pick Trippier. But I think Eddie Howe will pick Livramento.
Let us know in the comments what you would do. And what about on the left side? Lewis Hall doing really well. Again, more offensively than maybe defensively. And he has played Lloyd Kelly there as well, as you mentioned earlier in the show. What does he do on Sunday?
I think, even though I think it's back to that point earlier, whereby the players who have been around in this block of coaching under Howe for the last 2 weeks without a game at the weekend, I think he picks Lloyd Kelly again. It's an away game. He adds stature to the set piece defending, and I think it's another game where Lewis Hall might be worth half an hour when they need to attack a bit more, when they need to unleash a little bit down the wings. So I think he'll go the same. I think there's no reason to change that defense. Keep the chemistry the same. Although Shaw, is he coming back this weekend?
He'll be there.
Shaw's available again. He's been training because he's not been away with Switzerland. He retired. That's probably helped him. I think you probably bring Shaw back because he adds so much. He adds so much passing wise to that team. Just those forward passes he can knock and the diagonal balls are huge to Newcastle's kind of build up play. So you bring him back, but the rest of the defense probably stays the same.
Midfield, Tonali in, Longstaff in. Who's on the call?
Going Longstaff in.
Okay.
A lot of people might disagree. You want Tonali straight back in. Ultimately, there'll come a time where Eddie Howe has to start Tonali, but I think we might be a week or two away from that.
And on the wings, obviously, he played Gordon and Barnes and kind of alternated them. Will he do the same again?
I think that's a good formula because I don't think you can. I don't think you can drop Harvey Barnes. Harvey Barnes wants to play. I think he was really fed up not playing in the first game of the season, being benched after this preseason he'd had. And you've seen how, I mean, Harvey Barnes is a really, really great finisher. Double figures in goals he can get this year for Newcastle, no doubt about it, if he's played. And that finish he did in the Spurs game, opening his body and just directing it to the far corner, was a finish of a brilliant striker. And I think you've got to find a place for him. And if that means just Anthony Gordon and him switching around a little bit and giving Gordon a bit of free rein to come inside and Isaac move out on the left, I think it gives a bit of flexibility to the front line. And I think that's possibly the way they should go.
There we go. Let us know in the comments your thoughts. We're going to dive into some questions then that have been sent across X and email. And we'll start with this one from Rob Smythe. He says, "Hello, Mr. Musgrove. Glad to hear the Great North Run went well. An excellent continued work with the pods." Thank you very much, Rob. He says, "How long do you think it will be before some fans and pundits stop framing where the club is now against the Ashley era? I understand it was a barren time for the club, both off and on the pitch, but there has to be a point where we almost have to stop being grateful for what we have now, comparing it to the Ashley era, and actually resetting and acknowledging we should perhaps hold the club and those involved to different standards now, such as the two most recent transfer windows."
I totally agree. I think the Ashley era is gone. We probably want to forget it as quick as we can. It was a tough time to cover the club, tough time for fans to be still buying their season tickets and not seeing a club with direction. And I think the comparison should be gone now because Newcastle have had a really good phase of rebuilding after the Ashley era. They've spent 250 million. They've laid the new ownership and the new people who are running the club have laid their stall out and said, we want to be number one. We want to build a new stadium. We want a new training ground. We want to win trophies. We're going to win trophies in 5 or 10 years. We're going to win everything, Amanda Staveley said. So it's kind of now, forget the Ashley era. We kind of now have got to use that as the baseline judgment that the club wants to be judged upon and ask the right questions to see, are Newcastle doing what they should do to live up to these promises, live up to the euphoria that they created by making these promises in the first months after the takeover, and ask why isn't it happening quicker, and why haven't we got stadium news and training ground news and all that kind of stuff, and hold them to their promises, not the Ashley era, because that's gone.
Is there also a case that, holding those to account, it happens in two separate avenues? You've got the off the pitch stuff, like you say, stadium and training ground, and the promises that have been made, and we have to ask questions to why is it taking so long for the stadium and for the training ground, but also on the pitch where maybe things haven't gone as well as we'd hoped for, especially last season. The two separate kind of avenues that we've got to address and hold to account.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, because it's different departments, isn't it? And I don't subscribe to that opinion where last year was a big disappointment. I don't think it was. I think they finished 7th and it was par for the course.
But in terms of getting the top 4 when they did, that may be for some heightened expectations, and maybe in many ways, if it come the other way around, if Newcastle had finished 7th and then 4th, then it would look like brilliant strategic progress, natural progress. Yeah, it would. But then football is not a science, and mind you, can spend 660 million and still not have cracked it. So football's not a science. You need a lot of chemistry created by a manager and a coach, and they've got Eddie Howe as the coach, which is what everyone is happy with, and he's got to be trusted, but he's also got to be backed. But there's 2 different departments. Yeah, there's a business department and a Saudi ownership approving things partnership department, and then there's the football. Now, can the business department overachieve and give Eddie Howe what he needs to build on the pitch? Can Eddie Howe take what he's got and overachieve with what Newcastle have got? Overachieving would be top 4 this season. I can't see with the strength of the squads how Newcastle get back into the top 4, but they might want to prove everyone wrong. Eddie Howe wants to prove everyone wrong again, so maybe they can. So that's the dynamic that we're looking at. They've made these promises. Europe's the target this year. Is going to happen, and that's the standards they've set themselves, which are way above the standards that were set in the Ashley era. Rob's got a second question, and he asks, with so many players out of contract next year, are we facing a time bomb in terms of the major rebuild with not a lot of cash?
Yeah, well, I did ask Paul Mitchell about this last week. I said, look, this is, and he admitted that what he's inherited there in terms of about 11 players, I calculated, before the window in the summer, and maybe 7 potential first teamers were going to be out of contract. And then there's Anthony Gordon, who probably needs a new contract as well. So I think the priority now in the next month will certainly be working out who you want to keep. Like Dan Burn, I believe, is one of them. So you probably want to keep Dan Burn around. You need to extend his contract, and I would think he would probably want to stick around. Who are the others? Have you got a list?
Got the list there. So Sean Longstaff, Callum Wilson, Fabian Scher, Dan Burn, Jamal Lascelles, Emil Kraft, Martin Dubravka, Mark Gillespie, John Ruddy.
Right. So you're looking at that list there. If you're the sporting director, Andrew, I'm sure you do a fantastic job. You'd want to keep Longstaff, even if it was the challenge to Tonali and he's not the first.
I can see that logic, but I think it's a big season for Sean Longstaff, and obviously with Tonali coming back, maybe playing time will be a little limited. But I wouldn't right now be offering him a new deal.
Really?
I think he's got to show a little bit more.
What, he's going to go on a free transfer next summer?
No, I think between now and the whatever the cut-off point is for when he can talk to the clubs, which I think will be January. Yeah, I think he's got to prove himself in the next 3 months to earn a new deal.
Plus, he's pure profit, isn't he? Yes. On the old PSR thing.
So whether you cash in,
that might be a consideration. Wilson.
Well, I would have cashed in on Wilson this summer.
Yeah, Wilson's got to be vulnerable with his injury record. But I mean, it depends how it's going to be expensive to play. If he can give you 10 games, 15 games, come off the bench and get 8 goals.
Yeah, but we keep having this conversation. We're probably having this conversation 2 weeks after he returns from the current injury. Right. I just don't think, unfortunately, as good as a striker he is, that his body can hold up to what it needs to be a Premier League striker.
I might agree with you. I think
okay, so that's two potential exits.
I think that's 2 exits. So this is a big job shaping up here. We've got the list on the computer screen. That's where we're looking down.
Fabian Scher is a really interesting one because I think it's a little bit like Kieran Trippier.
Yeah.
Because I think, I think come the summer, he's still going to want to be first choice, and he's still going to be thinking he can offer something to a top Premier League side, which he will be able to. Mm-hmm. And it's whether he's going to be able to accept that he's not necessarily going to be first choice centre-back at Newcastle United. I think Newcastle will offer him another year, maybe 2, but it will come with the knowledge that, they're going to be in the market for another centre-back. And will someone like Fabian Scher accept that?
Well, if they get into Europe next summer and they've got all those extra games, I think he would play quite a lot. But Fabian Scher, former Swiss international, man of Europe. He could go and get if he's a free transfer, he can go and get himself a fantastic deal at a top Italian club, I think. I mean, he's in the box. I think he's in the box seat. I think if I was Eddie Howe, Paul Mitchell, I'd want to keep Fabian Schär, and I'd offer him 2 years, and I might sell him next summer. That makes sense. So you get transfer value out of him. Fabian Schär, I might think, I'll let this run down, see what my offers are in the summer. You might get a bigger wage offer an Italian club.
Dan Burn, I would keep. I think he's just hugely influential, and he wouldn't be in an ideal world, I think, first choice in any of the positions he's played. And although he has been fantastic, since he's been moved to centre back, and I don't think we're talking about him filling in because Botman's injured. I think if he played in the form he has done and Botman was fit, we'd be talking about going head to head. We'd be competing.
Yeah, you would.
I think he's been fantastic. So I think what he offers on and off the pitch, you give him at least another year.
I think you can't give him just a year. That's disrespectful. I think you give him 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jamal Lascelles is an interesting one.
Yeah.
He's going to turn 31 in November, and I think he shut a lot of people up when he came in and initially replaced Botman. I think he's been so unlucky with the injury. I think that's probably set him back. And I think had he not had the injury, I don't think there'd be much discussion about him getting another year on his deal. But with the injury, with Newcastle in the market for another centre back, I could see him.
He might get a good deal somewhere else.
Yeah.
He might become a number 1 centre half back at North Forest.
I could see that.
Or the like.
I just think the injury's probably sped up his exit, and I could see him going next summer on a free transfer.
Yeah, but a great character at any club, really.
Oh,
I mean, he's been great, Jamal.
Just think about all the criticism he had and all the dread there was when Botman got injured. And he came in. I mean, the game against PSG, fantastic.
Yeah, magic.
Arsenal
as well. Yeah. He rattled Arsenal in that home game.
Works so hard behind the scenes, and I'm good for him that he's got this injury because I think it probably has, like I say, accelerated his exit next summer. Emil Kraft, he's been fantastic.
He has.
I think there's questions, isn't there, about the expectation of fans when it comes to what we expect of the level of players at Newcastle United, what we expect to happen in the transfer market. But I think there has to be a bit of realism about squad building. Now, Emil Kraft, without any disrespect towards him, I think
you're going to say something disrespectful now, aren't you?
Probably. I think he would accept playing a backup role in the squad.
Possibly, yeah.
He's 30. He's got a good few years ahead of him. I would offer him a 2-year deal, and he forms a really good part of the squad.
Kind of versatile, right back cover. If Trippier goes, right back cover and centre back cover.
As you say there. So I don't think he would turn down an opportunity to stay another couple of years on Tyneside. Fair enough. I mean, Martin Dubravka, we all thought would be gone by now.
Yeah, the goalkeeper situation in Newcastle is truly weird. I mean,
goalkeepers,
just mad. I mean, we know what's going on, but
Martin Dubravka,
he's still number 2, isn't he? He's still number 2.
But then you've got Oddie Vlachodimos playing for Greece, starting for Greece.
Yeah, he's not
clean sheets.
Not going to get a look in at Newcastle, is he?
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Maybe Dubravka goes in. Well, if they can't loan Oddie out, call him Oddie now.
Why do you think he didn't go this summer?
Who, Dubravka? There mustn't have been like a firm offer for him. I mean, it's quite hard getting a move as a goalkeeper because only one goalkeeper is going to play, and if you're going to be backup elsewhere, you may as well be backup at Newcastle. May as well be number 2 at a great club, massive club, than going off to some smaller club and not knowing you're going to be number 1. So it's a really strange life being a goalkeeper. It must be really difficult. You see his wife's Instagram the other week saying, "I know you're stressed at work, but we're right behind you." So he obviously is feeling it as a stressful time as a number 2 and wondering where his future lies. And that's the kind of unsettling thing which you've got as a team player who's not playing and who contract's ending. I don't know. I hope he's happy. I mean, if he's number 2, that's great. I think he might accept that for the season and then see what happens at the end. I don't know if you offer him another deal. If you've got this Oddie guy who you've paid for millions for.
And of course, that interest in James Trafford was still there towards the end of the window. So I think Newcastle probably will go back into the market for yet another goalkeeper, but we'll certainly have to move on.
Probably not. You're probably not opening talks with Dubravka at this stage, are you? Okay.
No, but Sammy is. I mean, let us know in the comments what you would do with the features of these players.
It's a good game. This I like.
It is. I mean, I don't think did we come to any concrete?
Not many. We've been quite stingy on the deal front
but,
here.
Do you know?
But
we had, you were saying, you wouldn't just offer Dan Burner. Yeah, you think that's a bit disrespectful for that to be too. I think what we're seeing with some of the players Newcastle United are struggling to move on, or that they've been given big deals by the previous ownership. And I think those at boardroom level now will be very wary, especially with some of the players who are over 30, like Dan Burn, like Fabian Schär, of offering them long years on new deals, because wages will be pretty high for some of these guys. Do you again want to be in a year's time looking around thinking we need to move you on, but who's going to be paying XYZ a week for a 32, totally 33-year-old?
Because I think if you're a number one, and if you're in the team and you're in the first team and you're the defined number one that the club sees, the person who the club sees as number one in your position, then you offer them a new deal. If you're a number two in that position, then I think the ideal scenario for the club is to have a 21, 22, 23-year-old, if they're not in the team, as the challenger. You want the experienced, like defined first team, experienced, number one in their positions, dominating, really established. But then you want the young challenger coming up who's ready to step in and then add their value. So you're not going to get value transfer-wise and money-wise out of developing Fabian Schär for another year, or Dan Burn for that matter, or most of that list, apart from Longstaff. So you probably be wanting to have a tier of younger players pushing up into the first team, rather than just extending the lifespan of older players in the 30s who are not really first team. We're not sure what they are.
However, it was me making these decisions, I would say Dan Burn and Emil Kraft are probably the two who I can certainly see staying for an extra couple of years.
Are we going to call this podcast Simon and Andrew Play Sporting Director?
We may have to.
I think we should be
doing.
Yeah.
But with my Newcastle United hat on, as in what I think Eddie Howe and what Paul Mitchell might do, I can see them giving Sean Longstaff a new deal, because he is only 26. So at the very least, you protect the value. You don't risk losing him for 15 million in January. You give him a new deal, and then you can maybe
you might give him 2 or 3 years, and then make a decision in a later date, given that he's in the first team now.
But everyone aside, I don't think we can sit here and categorically say that we think they will be here post the summer, because we speak about Fabian Schär, brilliant servant, but again, it goes back to what I was saying. Will he be happy to be second choice and maybe tempted by an easier life, shall we say, in the Bundesliga or Serie A?
Yeah, well, and also the amount of churn with those players, that kind of fits with what Paul Mitchell was saying last week, in that he works in a 3-year cycle, and in a year you might change 6 players, and then another 6 and another 6, and then you've built a new squad of like 18 players. And they're the figures he mentioned last week when he was talking about kind of building and changing the whole squad around. But I mean, that takes money, doesn't it? So
it does, and that goes back to Rob's question about not having a lot of money, and you referenced it there. Getting someone of Callum Wilson's ability is going to cost you a lot of money. That's probably at least half your summer budget gone, because he's that good.
Yeah.
So if you're losing 4 or 5 of these players, you're losing Martin Dubravka, for instance, you have to go and get yourself a proper second choice goalkeeper. That's not going to be cheap. That's going to be 20, 25 million. A striker is going to be at least 35 million, you would think. So how much are Newcastle United really going to have to spend next summer? I can understand why some fans are worried.
That's right. But I think they're going to have to be opportunistic in terms of free transfers. They're going to have to look at everyone who's out of contract, make little approaches behind the scenes to say that Newcastle would be interested, so don't sign a new contract at your club, like they did with Tosin from Fulham, which was kind of flipped the transfer window on the head. They had to spend money on a centre half and Gay. So maybe they need to find out who a list of free transfers. Andrew's looking it up right now, and then they can slot in 2 or 3 clever cheap ones which cost nothing into the key. I tell you what, that's a free transfer. Kevin De Bruyne.
look at
him straight away.
Look at the list: Trent Alexander-Arnold, Mohamed Salah,
is he a free
Kevin De Bruyne.
Wow.
According to Transfer Market, Son, Van Dijk. And then we go down.
Well, here's one to replace if Calvin Lewin at Everton, who might get relegated, is available on a free transfer. Do you then get him on a free transfer and replace Callum Wilson with him? That would be kind of a little fancy football option, wouldn't
Do
it?
you know what? I did him a disservice about his injury record because actually he played quite a few times last season. But I think that's a name that kept cropping up throughout the summer, wasn't it? And Newcastle couldn't quite find the right price for him. And he started this season. I mean, haven't had a terrible start of the season, but he has started this season, and so he seems to be fit. Look, no doubt in his goal scoring ability, but you know, is he a man to take you to the next level?
Oh, he's a reserve striker. So he's a man to get you through rounds of the cup, come on and create havoc, and grab the odd goal. He's not going to take you to the next level as an Isak is, but he might hold things together nicely when Isak is injured or needs a rest.
I mean, yeah. And if you're looking down the rest of the list, there's no one that really jumps out. I mean, Kyle Walker-Peters, you know, could he come in and play as a backup to Tino Livramento? It wouldn't be the worst deal if you get him on a free. But I mean, you've got Harry Maguire. I mean, he's probably going to get a new contract.
Here we are. Amad Diallo, right winger.
Well, I suggested that.
Played very well at Sunderland.
I suggested that during the summer, and I got absolute pelters for it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, why is that? I mean, have they not
we
seen
were
him play?
we were talking about the ideal right wing transfer to bring in, and I suggested, well, if we were going to kind of try and save a bit of money and maybe spend the rest of it, or a bigger portion of it, on a striker at the time or a centre back, then someone like Diallo, who wasn't in favour at Manchester United at the time, he seems to have become a bit more of in favour under Ten Hag this season. You know, he would be an ideal player to sign. You know, 22 years old, he's going to have the time and space to become an even better player. He's definitely got that raw talent. Yes, he played at Sunderland, but who cares?
Doesn't matter. I mean, he proved himself at Sunderland. Man, you were watching him, and everyone was amazed that Sunderland didn't snap him up.
But you know, these are the kind of deals where you're right. If Newcastle haven't got a huge pot to buy players from next season, you know, deals like Diallo, where you maybe pay a bit more of a wage than you would if you were paying 25-30 million for him, but it's a sweetener to get him here. You know, someone like him, you know, would be a good bargain and would help you spread the cost elsewhere. Yeah,
I definitely think it would. I mean, Amad Diallo to Newcastle United next summer on a free transfer. There you go. We're going to we'll rewind this podcast in June when it happens. So.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on that. But the rest of the kind of the potential out of contract next summer, realistically, I mean, again, we went through the top list. It's not happening. I mean, Son would be some signing, but he's 32 actually, which surprises me. I didn't think he was that.
You want, they're going to have to get a tier of younger. Newcastle need to change the age profile of the squad a bit as well. It's got a bit towards 30, over 30. So I think that one of the main aims is to also shift the age profile. The value now, when you're building a squad and building a club, is in players who are 20, 21, 22, and they can have a good time and reach 25 and be worth tens of millions. So I think that's what Newcastle have got to do to strengthen the club and sell well.
So there you go. If there's any names on that list that you would fancy next summer, let us know. And let me go back to the questions. We've got Bill from Shipcoat who says, enjoying the pod and great to have Simon on board. He says, any idea why the delay in announcing the stadium review is? Been imminent for weeks. Also, any news on a possible new training ground, or is that linked to the above plans? And also, why no new sponsors or a stadium renaming deal?
Very good questions. I mean, questions that are hanging over the club and this regime. And they've been hanging over for a few months, and we all want to know what's going to happen with the stadium. And we said last week when we were chatting about it that it's the biggest decision probably in the history of Newcastle. It's bigger than changing managers. It's bigger than, you know, it's a massive statement of ambition. What happens next on the stadium front? Whether they do a rebuild and try and do a rebuild and get the city around that, controversial it might be, depending on where they want to put it, or whether they give St James's Park a lick of paint and try and extend it by 10,000 seats. I think I said, did we agree last week that we wanted a stadium rebuild? I don't know if we agreed or not. No. I said we should have Newcastle needed a stadium rebuild to have a super stadium to rival Tottenham, Arsenal, Man United's rebuild.
Sorry, by rebuild you mean relocation?
Well, it might be near. It might be very, very near St James's Park, but I think a new stadium.
So if we were voting with our heads, we would say relocation, rebuild. If we were voting with a heart, well, I said if I was voting with a heart, you'd try and expand as much as you can where it is currently.
Where it is, yeah.
But I think we both agreed city centre is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And David on Twitter has asked similar questions, you know, about the stadium and the training ground. I think, look, with this, as you say, it is the biggest decision they're going to make. It's going to be kind of, you know, a once in a generation decision, and it's the forever home. You don't buy your forever home without really doing the due diligence and exploring absolutely every single avenue that you can. So yes, we'd all like news right here, right now. And yes, there have been whispers that's going to be imminent, but I think you can forgive the club for taking their time with it, because it is such a big decision. It's one that you can't get wrong. It's one that's not going to please everybody. So they have to get it right. And I think you can just forgive them for taking their time with it.
On the training ground thing, I think that's well on the back burner. I don't think that's going to happen for years. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a site identified. They've spent, was it 10 million, they said, on the existing training ground, which people say it's not fit for purpose, it's rubbish. I mean, look, to me, if it's just the players going there with Eddie Howe, there's a perfectly nice building there, and the facilities look good. They've got like an aqua pool now for injury rehab, and they seem to have a half decent setup there. It's not a grand vanity project that some clubs have gone for, like Leicester. And you know, players aren't going to walk into that new signings and go, "Wow, look what Newcastle got." But in terms of training players and having everyone together and fun things for them to do, and you know, have meetings, and the pitches are immaculate. I mean, you don't really need anything more than they've got outside. So it's just that built. I don't think there's an urgency to change the training ground at all. I wouldn't have thought at the minute for the next 5-10 years. We spent money on it.
Let us know in the comments what you think about the training grounds. Dean says, at what point will the lack of news on future stadium plans become a concern?
Yeah, well, I mean, what year are Newcastle going to host the next big tournament? Is it like 4 years time?
I think it's
2028. Is that Euros coming in 2028? We're having to Google here because we're lacking in firm knowledge.
No, that's not the right
I think
answer. There we go.
St James's Park is going to host UEFA games in 2028. So like that, you know, Newcastle aren't going to surrender that prestige thing. The city's not going to want to surrender that because of a rebuild. So there's that happening in 4 years' time. You kind of got to get your skates on if you're going to do anything with a stadium pretty sharpish, so that it's ready for the Euros, and you know what the capacity is for the Euros in 2022-28. If you're leaving it to next year and after that, that's going to clash with the Euros, so you can't do anything with it. So unless it's a rebuild, so maybe that's not even in their thoughts, and it's a rebuild somewhere else.
I think concern is probably the wrong word as well. I don't think anyone should be concerned, but you know, obviously there is a thirst for information and a thirst to know exactly where we're going to be watching Newcastle United. But I don't think we should be concerned by the delay. No, I think it's just one of those things. It's going to take time to get the right decision. Unfortunately,
there's a thirst for people who are locked out as well for tickets. I mean, there's loads of lads I know, teenage lads who'd love to go and watch a match and be in there and buy tickets on an ad hoc basis. And there's a hunger to go and see Newcastle now and be part of the rebuilding of the club and feel it's that your club, and there's a new generation of fans to get into it. And like that's the urgency. There's not concern from people who've got their season tickets, you know, getting in every week, but there's tens of thousands of fans, maybe 15,000 locked out, or casual fans who want to come for 10 games a year. That's the concern for me. You want to get those people in as quick as possible.
I think that when fans see news about Old Trafford, which came out earlier this week, and initial plans have started to be put on the table, I think, you know, it does ask questions, and people really want to see the process accelerated. But I just go back to the original point: massive decision. It's not one you can rush. They've got to get it right. They can't afford to get it wrong. It's not just the decision; it's the PR that comes after with it as well. The way they announce it, whatever they're going to do,
how they're paying for it.
Exactly.
I mean, is it going to come out of a side that's going to give them that money to build it, or is the club going to be saddled with however many tens of millions of debt? We don't know. I mean, that's another big decision.
Yeah, and look, if the decision is to stay, and then there's so much that comes with that, you know road closures, you know, and all that, you know, if they decide to go, it's about finding the right spot to do it. So it's not just about coming to a decision; it's about everything that comes with that decision. So it's no wonder it's taken them a very, very long time. And but we do hope that it comes sooner rather than later. Alex says everyone is calling for Tonali to replace Longstaff, but have we actually seen Tonali play that well at right centre mid? He played left centre mid for Italy and flourished. Is there an argument for him to be Joe Linton's replacement more than Longstaff?
Not at the minute. I mean, Joe Linton dominates and is so physical and so brilliant at winning the ball back and bullying the opposition that you want him in, especially with the way the side's playing at the minute. You want him in there doing that dirty work. Tonali would be better on the ball than Joe Linton on the left, definitely.
I do think we need to see an improvement in the win, Joe Linton. I think he's shown glimpses of it against Southampton. He was colossal, but the games after, he hasn't quite looked himself. And I think it's partly what I was saying about just needing a bit more work on the training ground as a collective unit. And hopefully against Wolves and so forth, we will see him back to his best. Because I did think against Tottenham, the assist before the assist for the winner, he didn't look his usual self. He was careless on the ball. Yeah,
that's my doubt about Joe Linton, is like the cleverness on the ball. There's no doubt about his physical attributes and how amazing, how you'd hate to play against him. But I think just that cleverness on the ball and the intricacies of getting out of tight situations rather than just using your physicality, it's probably the doubt about
him. Isaac says, thoughts on Trippier links to way to Turkey. I think it's imperative that we keep hold of him. We've discussed that. You can pop back and see the answer to that one. It says, thoughts on all the Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe so-called struggle in the papers in the last few days. Not all the papers, but are we calling it a power struggle? Is there a power struggle in the corridors of St James's Park?
Well, I think there's differences of opinions and differences of directions and different, and then there's some of the stuff that Mitchell said last week has kind of upset the apple cart a little bit. Not fit for purpose scouting department. I can imagine if you're in the scouting department, you're kind of bristling at that when you've worked so hard over the summer. So I don't know if it's a power struggle. It sounded like, from my point of view, that if you're taking Mitchell's words as truth, that he's spoken to Eddie Howe a lot, and he's given him a lot of information and kept him in the loop for a lot. And now we do talk about this before we started recording, but football is such a melodrama. It's so dramatic when someone says one thing and someone says the other, and it's a big fallout, and everyone's upset, and like that's real life, but it's football playing out in newspapers and in discussions. It doesn't have to be so dramatic and so flouncy. Like, everyone's flouncing. Someone says something bad about your scouting department. Oh, I'm really upset. You know what I mean? Why just not say, well, yeah, we've got a few limitations. We've not had the budget. We're going to improve. We're going to do what you want that improving. We'll improve it. Why has it got to be some great big drama of people falling out when you get challenged to do something differently or something better? Like, it doesn't have to be like that. You can say, fair enough, I know my limitations. If my boss says you're not very good at this, I'll say, if he's got a point, I'll say, all right, then I'll try and make it better. Or can you change the way you do that? I'll try and make it better. I don't walk out and flounce and say there's a power struggle. But it's football. So that's what football is. Football is one great big camp. I think one of my colleagues called it a camp melodrama. So football is like that. And we love the fallouts and we write about the fallouts. But at the end of the day, if you want to do the job and you want to improve, then you've got to take the challenges on the chin.
Yeah, most certainly so. And it's interesting that the comments are coming in live as we're recording this, because Dean, who asked a question about the stadium and it being a concern the longer this feasibility study isn't out in the public, he says, for me, it's a single of intent of the owners going forward. It's the safest investment they can make as an asset that goes on the books. So if they skim it, the red flags will be out. And you've kind of alluded to that, haven't you, about the way where the money comes from and if it's going to be big and bold, or is it going to come from placing debt on the club? It is a big moment for the owners.
It's a massive moment, and if they fund it completely, and it's if they're really building a stadium, what's that going to cost? Like 400 million, 500 million to build, and more, probably maybe $1 billion. Are they going to fund that or park the debt on the club? Or if they put that much money in, the Rubens have got to match it 15% or have their share diluted. Are they going to stick 15% of 500 million in? What's that? 75 million?
I mean,
they probably could, actually.
They could afford to.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the financial structure of any tweaks to St James's Park are going to be fascinating to see. And like there are things that like fans now are so savvy that they want to know about. And every little detail of the club, the way things are done, it's. But
again, that plays into maybe the delay, because there's so many things that have to be considered. It's not just about the stadium.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that if X puts X in or whatever, if the Saudis put this much in, the Rubens have to put this much in, so that them discussions have to be held. So there's loads of little things that go on aside from the actual decision on the physical stadium. So, you don't envy the person having to put that report together at all. So,
and all that's the Saudi approval thing as well. I mean, they're not quick. They're not naturally quick decision makers. And we saw that in other transfer windows where everything had to be signed off by the investment chief in Europe, and two of them were visiting along with Al Ramayan. They came to the game at Spurs. There's three of the big chiefs were here. And that sign off, I mean, for a project that size, that's going to take a while to get it approved. Even if they know what they want to do, it's going to take a while to get all those books in a row so you can present it as a coherent direction for Newcastle Stadium.
And when was it announced? It was announced just before Christmas, wasn't it? Am I right in thinking? So they've been doing about 9 months now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that, and that's consultation. Usually when you do a consultation and you're on the council or whatever, I think people have a pretty much good idea of what they want to do. Now, the indications were from Eels when we saw them at the end of last season. Can't remember now, it all merges into one, where they were thinking 65,000 is the kind of sweet spot capacity for Newcastle. And so if it's 65,000, that would suggest an extension to St James's Park. Depends whether they recalibrate ambitions and think they can fill 80 or 90 and have more corporate boxes, and whether they can sell those boxes in Newcastle, because Newcastle is not London. So, yeah, it's a difficult.
Do you think that, let's say this feasibility study came out and they announced they were going to leave St James's Park, do you think it would come out with the location picked for the new stadium, or do you think the announcement would be, right, we've considered everything, here's the costings, here's why we're deciding we're going to leave, it's going to be tough, etc. But we haven't decided on a location yet. Or do you think it would be all packaged as one? We're leaving and this is where we're going to go to.
I think if they decided on a location and they were confident it was clean and it was easy to do, then we'd have heard about it by now. I think if they announced they want to go and build a new stadium and help, and they want to, it's quite a good political move, this, by the club, it would be actually, if they said, we need 80,000, we need a venue, this is Newcastle, we're like the figurehead, the flagship around the world of Newcastle. Newcastle United leads Newcastle almost as much as politicians and stuff. Then if they say they need to go somewhere, help us find a site, city council, council leader, mayor, right? We need to be in the city centre, and we need, we need all these attributes. Then that massively puts the pressure on the political will and the planning will to get that done. So yeah, that would be good. That would be a bit of a power play, because voters, Newcastle fans who are voters, would want then all the politicians to weigh in and find them a new home.
It would just be interesting to see how that report came out. If that was the final conclusion.
Yeah,
I think fans would find it easier to accept if it came with, and this is where we're moving to. I think if it was we're moving, but we haven't quite worked out where yet, then I think it would be harder to accept. I think fans would want to know exactly what the plans are, which is easier said than done, isn't it? Because as you could have all these conversations with landowners, about council, planning permission. It's a minefield to get through. So we will wait and see what happens. Final two questions then to wrap up. Elliot Anderson, player of the month for Nottingham Forest.
How galling is that? That's really, I mean, you saw the highlights reel of Elliot Anderson playing for Forest. And he's jinking left, right, offloading the ball, having shots. It just looks like he's going to thrive there, and he's going to be worth more than they sold him for. And he's a Newcastle boy. Do you know what I found really heartbreaking was when Newcastle was celebrating, he got substituted, or he was walking off after the penalty shootout, and there was a video of him coming down the tunnel, and all the Newcastle players, his ex-teammates, were over there. The Newcastle fans were celebrating over there, and he just turned around and had a little look, like, no, that could have been me. That should have been me. That was it was a fan video from behind the dugout. It just made me feel really sad.
Well, the footballing gods are listening or watching. I'm sure that somewhere the script has been written for him to come back as a Newcastle United player in the years to come.
On a free transfer.
Yes, hopefully. So don't have to pay for anything. Fantastic. Finally, there was a very weird link earlier this week that suggested that Eddie Howe wanted Anthony from Manchester United.
Wow. I didn't see that.
You didn't see that.
Anthony from Man U. So we'll have Anthony on one wing and Anthony on the other.
The suggestion that, well, this
report, Tony.
Yeah, This report claimed that Eddie Howe feels he could get the best out of him after what has been a very disappointing time in Manchester United.
Yeah, he did an interview, Anthony, I think, with my colleague on the Mirror site, Dave McDonnell, about his troubles at Man U and how he's not, how he's got to knuckle down and it's not going right for him there. So that's another thing about being opportunistic in the transfer market. And don't buy players at the peak who are being talked about, like Gahey, who is actually peak value, England thriving in the summer at the Euros. You probably buy players who are a bit rougher on the edges and haven't thrived. So you can see the logic. If Eddie Howe thought he could get into in his head and make him a better player, I mean, I don't know enough about that individual to know what his flaws are, but he's foreign as well, so that's kind of doesn't fit with the stereotype of Eddie Howe wanting English players. But
big wages, hasn't impressed, attitude problems according to some. And if Ten Hag, who worked with him over in Holland, can't get the best out of him in Manchester United, then I know Eddie Howe is a magician, but I just don't think that would be one that many fans would want. I don't think it's one that Eddie Howe would want either.
And the wages front as well. I mean, it just if you're trying to nick a Man U player, you're half in his wages probably. The star who's been signed for that much money.
And we thought with the close of the transfer window, the nonsense would stop, but it continues. But anyhow, thank you to Simon for coming back onto the podcast. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Do get in the comments and leave us any questions or any viewpoints on anything that we've discussed today. I'll remind you of the email address as well, the eabwpodcast@reachplc.com. Leave us a rating and review. We're going to take a week's break because Simon is off next week.
I'm off on holiday for a week.
Anywhere nice?
I'm going cycling in the Pyrenees.
Oh,
so it's not like much of a holiday, but
very fancy. I
come back with a bit less weight.
Yeah, I promise him I wouldn't make him dial in because we don't want to ruin his holiday. But fingers crossed, Newcastle can pick up victory against Wolves on Sunday. And I will be back very soon. We will have the match preview with John Gibson as well as a view from the opposition as well. So plenty to come this week. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And for myself and Simon, we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.